Lots of excitement and energy around what could be coming this year, 2021, with a new administration. And so we thought it was the perfect time to ask for some predictions and go to an expert. We're so lucky to work with STRAT, your firm. We've had a great long-term relationship. We count on you for expert advice on 401ks and our reserve fund and what's happening in the financial world. And I know our members are really going to benefit from your knowledge and expertise in this area. So because it's a week for asking for predictions, I'm going to start right by asking you, what do you think the Biden administration might be handling, putting our way, dealing with in the next few months or in the years to come in this arena, Alison?
What great timing to talk about, what's potentially to come. We know we've got a pretty big sea change as far as control in Washington, and that could have a lot of potential impacts on retirement plans. So let's first talk about the Biden administration side. They're largely going to be able to drive changes in retirement plans through the regulatory route, through the Department of Labor, as well as through Treasury and the IRS. On the Department of Labor side, some folks may have seen Biden published a list yesterday of executive orders that'll be under review that kind of are left over from the Trump administration. There's actually only one on that list from the Department of Labor, but it's a retirement plan one. It's the ESG regulation, or financial factors in selecting plan investments. So that's expected to be a big topic of conversation for the new administration. But some of the other things are going to be pretty on the margin. Missing participants has been a big topic for the regulators. There was some recent guidance from the Department of Labor on that side, so that's likely to continue to be a discussion. There was a new fiduciary rule put out by the Department of Labor last year, really clarifying instances in which service providers to retirement plans must act as a fiduciary to plan sponsors or plan participants. That will likely be under review as well. And then one of the things that came out of last year's discussions, especially around the Secure Act, are pooled employer plans, or PEPs. This is a really new opportunity intended mostly for smaller employers to potentially band together in lieu of sponsoring their own plan. So those products are now starting to come to market as financial service providers are putting together these pooled plans, but there's still a lot of questions there, especially around conflicts of interest. How a organization can potentially sponsor a plan, but also provide services to that plan as well. So that's an area that I know a lot of financial service companies were hoping that the government would be somewhat lenient about, but that's potentially less likely under a Biden administration than it may have been under a second Trump administration.
So in terms of volume, Alison, is this kind of going to look like more activity and more focus on some of the things that employers may have been waiting for or concerned about? I mean, is it going to be trending in terms of the level of activity? Are these things that people have been waiting for a long time? Is there a pent-up demand for new things to happen in this arena? Or will the pace remain kind of consistent with the Trump administration?
Yeah, great question. We think probably broadly the pace is likely to be actually somewhat consistent, but the pace has picked up in the past couple of years. Retirement plan changes is actually kind of a rare area of bipartisan agreement. So we may see things pick up a little bit with having potentially more things moving forward in Congress under Democratic control. But there's, again, a lot of bipartisan support. You mentioned the Secure Act. That was passed at the very end of 2019. There's already been a couple of bills proposed, even in 2020, that have been considered kind of successors to the Secure Act, really continuing to try to move forward ideas that have been discussed pretty broadly and do seem to have pretty broad support that just haven't made it over the finish line. A lot of these ideas are not things that would be overwhelming changes to the current system, but really changes on the margin. Broadly, Congress is looking for ways to improve retirement readiness and improve retirement security. And truly, when we look nationally, the biggest issue that impacts individuals' retirement readiness is not if they are participating in their employer-sponsored plan. Obviously, that's important, but when companies sponsor plans, most people are using those programs. The biggest issue nationally is individuals not having access to plans. So for companies that don't sponsor their own plans today or don't sponsor an opportunity today, that's an area we could see some of the biggest degree of change, looking at changing the requirements to really push companies to offer plans. Also looking at changing some of the incentives to offer plans. There have been some increases in recent years to tax credits available to small businesses that are starting plans. And there's definitely some momentum to expand those and enhance those, even looking at things like credits for offering a company contribution to try to encourage perhaps employers that already sponsor plans to enhance those and really start to think a little bit more about retirement readiness.
Wow. So there is quite a bit of opportunity there for some helpful changes as well as some maybe new opportunities for Americans to get involved in saving for retirement. As I saw a little news clip this morning of President Biden with his big pile of executive orders that he was signing, he said to the press, clearly this is just one avenue of change. We're going to need legislative changes as well. Which again is a much more broad statement, not just focused on the topic at hand today. But I think that's a really interesting point that some of these things, fortunately, because 401ks or retirement haven't been super partisan issues, perhaps some of these legislative changes will be possible in this new administration.
Yeah, for sure. Another area that we'll definitely be keeping tabs on the legislative front is, of course, tax policy. That's always a hot topic, and I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I believe it's every new administration of the last 6, maybe 8 administrations, with one exception, has done a tax bill in their first year. And with Democrats having control of Congress, it seems reasonable at this point to expect there's going to be something on the tax front. And retirement always ends up as a point of discussion whenever taxes are under consideration. It's true if you think about the value of the tax deduction, the fact that we get to deduct our 401k contributions from tax returns, that's a lot of deferred tax revenue. For the government. So oftentimes there's discussion there about potential changes to the system. We rarely see those discussions go very far because it's important to keep in mind, the fact that we're deducting those amounts from our taxes today, it's not tax avoidance, it's just tax deferral. That money is taxed when it comes out of plans. I don't think it's a secret. There has been quite a bit of discussion about potential increases in taxes, especially for higher earners. And that definitely could drive some action in the retirement plan space more broadly. Maybe not necessarily in core 401k plans. We don't think it's likely there'll be much change there. But if we're seeing higher tax rates, seeing potentially the increase in demand for deferred compensation plans for higher earners, giving them more opportunities to manage their own tax situations. And then especially for employer-owned organizations or organizations looking for other benefit opportunities, things like hybrid pension plans, cash balance plans can make a lot of sense to help manage that tax situation.
Well, those are, again, things that I'm sure will catch the attention of many of our members and employers as they look at what's coming down the pipe. So at every one of our quarterly meetings, when we talk about how we're doing with our retirement plan, there's always a section where we talk about recent cases or litigation. And we hear what kind of the moral of the story is given those cases. Do you see any potential litigation or big cases in our future that could cause us to make changes or consider particular issues?
Yeah, fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, depending on your perspective, fiduciary breach litigation is most of the time kind of nothing new under the sun. It's a lot of the same allegations. My theory is, obviously, a lot of us have spent a lot more time in our homes in the course of the last year, and that's led the plaintiffs' attorneys to just be, spending more time in front of their computers, generating more and more new cases. And when you read the litigation, it's a lot of almost the exact same case, the exact same allegations, just replacing the name of the company being evaluated there. The hot topics remain funds and fees. On the fee front, alleging that fees are unreasonable, that committees and fiduciaries were not monitoring their fees, and that the level of the fees was not appropriate for the plan. On the fund side, allegations that investments were imprudent or that funds were inexpensive. I think what's most important to remember about litigation and the risk of litigation is at the end of the day, it's about process. It's not about the answer, it's about having a process and being able to demonstrate that process. So, really asking yourself, do I know what the fees of the plan are? Do I understand how they're structured, how they're changing over time? And really, as a fiduciary, being able to articulate, what process do we have to review these fees, to compare them to the market, and to build our assessment that they're reasonable? Those are important questions the fiduciary should be able to answer, alongside with monitoring investments. How do we monitor fund performance? What drives us to take action on a fund or not take action on a fund? So many of these allegations are kind of Monday morning quarterbacking. Anyone can go and look and say, hey, this fund had a bad year last year, and so therefore I don't think it's a good fund, and here's a different fund that did better. That's not an investment process that would hold up in court, and in fact would be quite damaging to participants if anytime a fund had weak returns that we immediately run out and replace that fund. So really being able to articulate, hey, what is our investment process? How do we make decisions is really important for fiduciaries to be able to dialogue then with participants who may be asking questions.
So, in terms of making sure that you have a solid process in place, many organizations like ours use a co-fiduciary, a
Mhm.
reputable organization like CapStrat or CapStrat specifically. Um, Frequency of meetings. Has there been any changes in the guidance around that, as well as what kind of information is shared? Again, I find some of the aspects of these meetings particularly interesting. Of course, I love data. I love comparative statistics, hearing what other employers are doing. And you're always so helpful in coming to the table with that information, including that information that might keep a Monday morning quarterback from saying, oh, I read about this fund last week, or that fund manager, they seem to be going south quickly. Can we make a quick change? And you would talk us off the ledge, and make sure that we were putting them on a watch list, but not necessarily becoming day traders. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you ensure you have an appropriate process in place, and how you can lean on an advisory firm like your own to make sure that you feel like your process is going to take good care of you should one of those plaintiff's attorneys cause you stress and discomfort?
Sure. Yeah, so it's a great question, and we very much acknowledge sometimes it is a fine line to walk of, leaning on an advisor, but really acknowledging that you can't fully disconnect from the process. Even for organizations that are retaining a discretionary advisor or a 338 fiduciary and outsourcing the decision making, the organization always retains some degree of responsibility and legal liability with respect to the plan. So really leaning on an advisor to first provide information that you can understand. I think we oftentimes find that a lot of key stakeholders, investments, retirement plans, it's certainly not anyone's full-time job just to focus on that element. And they've got a lot of other things on their plate, but sometimes feel like, uncomfortable asking questions like, should I know more here? And at the end of the day, if you're working with an organization and they're not providing you information that you understand, you're asking questions and you're just not getting clarity, that's a sign that you may want to consider, hey, is there room to improve on this relationship, whether it's changing the process, looking at different partners, so that you can feel comfortable that you really understand what's happening in the plan. You asked about meeting frequency. That's a really interesting point, and I think we see different responses from different players in the industry. We always want to recognize some of the inherent potential biases there. We see a lot of organizations really promoting the idea of quarterly meetings because they feel that if they don't meet every quarter, that they're not seeing their clients enough, they're not dialoguing enough, and that's really the only way that they're communicating with clients. From our perspective, quarterly meetings are in some ways a relic of a time when it was really only feasible to generate a report once every 3 months. And it took quite a long time to produce that report and collect that information and print it and mail it. And that's just not the technology environment we live in these days. We are in regular communication with clients as things are arising. And, for us, a committee meeting is, time we get together to document a lot of the process, as well as really focus on making decisions. And for some organizations, that's 4 times a year. For a lot of our clients, it's 2 or 3 times a year. And it really depends on their preferences and priorities and volume of activities.
So many good points there, Allison, but I certainly know how lucky we are to have basically information in real time, right? We're able to get a snapshot almost on a minute's notice, if not a day's notice, of exactly what's happening in our plan. And so an artificial, necessity for that quarterly meeting might not be necessary or appropriate in today's world,
Right.
especially when we can get at the information anytime we want it or need it.
Mhm.
So another interesting area is trends. Like any other trends that you think are either already well underway and kind of, just they're going to keep growing or evolving, or things that you think might just be coming onto our radar screens in the months ahead?
Sure. So there's always things percolating. If we think about plan design or plan features, especially, some of the things that we're expecting to see a lot of conversation on in the coming years include kind of plan withdrawals and guaranteed income. In a lot of ways, a lot of the best practices now for plan design around automatic enrollment, automatic increase. We've seen company contributions rising in recent years. Those features, I should mention, using target date funds, using a qualified default as an investment portfolio. We've largely solved for a lot of the accumulation challenge, getting people into plans and getting them saving. Participants are sticking with those auto features, and we're seeing more and more participants hitting 10, 15+% savings levels in diversified age appropriate investment portfolios. So the next horizon is great. You've got employees who've spent years saving and investing in the plans. They're getting close to retirement. They've got this big account balance, and now what? So I think we're going to really see both on plan design as well as tools and resources, focus on how do we help people take that money and turn it into income. And unfortunately, that's probably a lot more challenging than the accumulation side. For most employees, their retirement savings is probably going to be the single biggest asset that they have. Maybe their house notwithstanding, but probably the biggest pot of money they have. And when you're looking at a 6-figure account balance and then thinking, okay, how do I translate this into a monthly paycheck? That's a challenge. So there's certainly opportunities for record keeping tools and resources, just simple calculators to help. Plan design features can help. Does the plan allow for a participant to take installments and actually get payments from the plan every month? And maybe a more fundamental question for plan sponsors, do you want people doing that? Is this a plan to help people prepare for retirement or to actually fund their retirement and get paychecks? Those are kind of 2 different philosophies to think about. And then continuing down that path is guaranteed income and annuities. With the move away from pension plans, one of the benefits of a pension plan is it was by and large a fixed amount every month, guaranteed, by the plan itself. And in 401ks, there's really not a guarantee opportunity. Certainly someone can take their balance, go on their own, purchase an annuity. That could be a pretty expensive endeavor. There's certainly risk to the individual there. So there's a lot of work being done on developing products and developing services to see, are there ways to incorporate guaranteed income into 401k plans? I think we're probably in the third, fourth inning. It's definitely an area we're encouraging clients not to be early adopters in. There's a lot of stuff to work out here, whether it's fees, administration, portability, and probably from my perspective, the biggest one is participant communication and understanding. We're seeing some of these products that fundamentally, if participants don't understand it and they end up using the product, potentially investing in the product for a few years, acquiring a guarantee, paying for that guarantee, just to reach retirement, cash out and forfeit that guarantee, that's like, not what we're trying to accomplish there. So it's definitely going to be an area for development. Something we're starting to encourage clients to think about is just fundamentally, what is your philosophy? What do you want to offer here? Do you want your plan to be a source of retirement income, or is this about kind of helping people save for retirement and then, sending them kind of on their way from there?
I see so many additional opportunities here, Allison, not just for partners or vendors, but for employee communications on the
Mhm.
employer side, because I continue to read how employees place so much trust in their employer and look to them for guidance and information. And if that biggest pot of retirement funding is coming from your trusted employer, to be able to provide the education and information to help those employees make good decisions, not just while they're currently employed, but as they move into their retirement years, seems like a really important and valuable piece of the puzzle. And I love your advice about being an early adopter and, maybe pumping the brakes a few times and be very thoughtful, not only about your philosophy, but about what vehicles, tools, products, services you're offering to make sure that you can really support whatever that is, to help your employees not only have the right options, but then do the right thing for them as individuals.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit. That focus was a little bit on our, perhaps our more senior team members who are moving into their retirement years. But the press has certainly been full of information, stories, um, and examples of organizations who are either considering or who are offering student loan repayment options
Mhm.
as either a part of a 401k, a supplement to salaries. Um, Talk to me a little bit about this. Is it just the Wall Street Journal and other publications grabbing these exciting articles that are just about Fortune 500 companies? Or are these benefits really starting to make their way into more traditional mainstream small to medium sized employers? And if so, what should we be thinking about, considering, or what landmines should we avoid?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about a trendy topic. So, let's talk first about what some of these student loan benefits can look like. And, in a true financial sense, from a company provided financial benefit, there's really two big buckets of how that could be done, or we're seeing that done. One is inside a 401k plan, and one is outside a 401k plan. So, the inside the plan strategy, as we have seen it designed to date, is essentially to say, if an employee is making student loan repayments and can demonstrate that, and they're not contributing to their 401k plan, then the employer would go ahead and match those loan repayments as if the employee had contributed to the plan. So the idea here is to essentially benefit if you've got employees that saying basically are saying, I can't save for retirement because of my student loans, that they would still be getting the company provided benefit. We're not seeing widespread adoption of this strategy. It's a very new strategy. It's very administratively complex. There's some potential compliance concerns that I won't get in the weeds on, but very difficult to pull off right now. There's certainly work being done on the administrative and compliance side to see if there can't be a greater pathway created there. But, if you're considering that strategy, I think the fundamental question that we really encourage sponsors to consider is, what problem are you solving for? Because that strategy very clearly is trying to solve for a problem that you have a significant group of employees who are not saving for retirement because of their student loans. And candidly, that's not a problem that we have seen with very many of our sponsors. So we want to make sure we're solving for the problem and not creating a new problem whereby perhaps people stop participating since they no longer have to. Where we have seen some of our clients and potentially more sponsors taking action is the outside the plan strategy. So the idea of offering a repayment benefit whereby the sponsor says, I'm going to make repayments directly to your loan servicer to pay down your loans for you up to a certain amount per year. And this is an area where, again, some companies felt really strongly. They wanted to be leaders. They wanted to do something. But we saw a lot of companies of all sizes kind of backing away from this for a couple reasons. One, there wasn't a tax preferred way originally to provide the benefit. So fundamentally, it was saying, hey, I'm just paying Mary Lynn an extra $5,000 per year. It's just going to her loan servicer versus in her paycheck. And we saw a lot of companies feeling kind of uncomfortable of, does that fundamentally feel okay for how we want to reward people? Now, with the CARES Act and now the Consolidated Appropriations Act at the end of last year, that benefit now can be delivered in a tax preferred manner. So that shifts that calculus a little bit. So we have seen some conversation, other sponsors have looked at it and said, not every benefit we offer is going to fit for every single employee. And we want to think about how this potential benefit fits in our overall package. One strategy that we've suggested to some of our clients is to think about, potentially offering, since it could be a pretty significant, financial benefit, offering a choice to say, hey, do you want the $5,000 a year, let's say, to go towards your student loans, or do you want it as a 529 contribution? And giving the ability to have what could be a valuable benefit used in one of a couple ways. Because these types of benefits aren't ERISA plans, we don't have to follow all the 401k rules, especially those non-discrimination rules. So we have seen some companies put in some pretty narrow plans around student loan repayment. It's not something you have to offer to everybody. You may have a key population that you're trying to attract and retain, where this could be a really valuable benefit if for that specific population. So you could look at just a small group of people there.
Yeah, I encourage our members to think about the question that you posed, which is, what problem are you trying to solve? Right?
Mhm.
This isn't the benefit of the day or the week or the year necessarily, and it is not a one size fits all. There are different ways to administer it, but there are lots of implications that need to be really analyzed before we decide to move in that direction. But I'm guessing from what you said, it's not going away anytime soon. We're going to hear more about it, especially given the tax situation has changed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, another element I always would invite folks to consider as you're evaluating that kind of benefit is really being cognizant about where any information you're being provided with is coming from. I think, unfortunately, in this industry, there are very cozy relationships, if not complete overlap, between those who are doing the research and selling the products. So, you may be talking to someone who could help you put a student loan repayment benefit in place. And if that organization is telling you that, all of your competitors are doing this, you might try to get another opinion and see if you can't get some more robust data to support that. We see that a lot in this industry. Thinking about student loan benefits, I think that falls under a broader umbrella of financial wellness. And I think that's a great example of, we've seen a lot of vendors kind of racing in with product to try to fill this financial wellness gap. And, most organizations we found first would really benefit from articulating, what does financial wellness mean to us as a company? How are we going to accomplish that and measure that? And then next question, what offerings do we already have that fit with these financial wellness goals? And then maybe what new benefits or products can we plug in to move us down the pipeline, not let's just start adding products.
So another trending topic is socially responsible investing. And we're
Mhm.
seeing more employees not only say, I want to work for socially responsible organizations, but I want to work for employers whose benefit plans give me opportunities for socially responsible investment options. Is that a flash in the pan? Is this something that employers are turning to you for advice and counsel on? How do you respond to these issues?
Yeah, it's definitely an increasing topic of conversation. And to your point, we are hearing about more and more requests from employees, and especially from a younger generation, that is asking about these kinds of opportunities. So, when we say socially responsible investing, you might hear the term ESG, it means environmental, social, and governance criteria. I think the first thing to note is socially responsible investing means different things to different people. What I consider socially responsible may not be socially responsible in Mary Lynn's opinion. So it's very subjective. It has been quite hotly debated on the government side. The Department of Labor, as I mentioned earlier, did last year finalize a new regulation that was broadly intended or perceived to restrict retirement plans' ability to offer these types of funds. The regulation is titled Financial Factors in Selecting Plan Investments. And basically, what it says is that when selecting investments for participants, fiduciaries should really only consider factors that directly impact financial performance and not any other factors. The prior labor secretary said pretty directly, look, if you're prioritizing social issues over investment returns needed for retirement, that's probably a breach of fiduciary responsibilities. And saving for retirement and investing for retirement in and of itself is an important social cause. Fundamental subtext kind of underlying a lot of that regulation is a belief that there's a conflict between socially responsible investments and investment performance. And as the marketplace of socially responsible strategies has increased, we can tell you that's not inherently true. There are socially responsible strategies that can generate investment returns that are comparable, if not in excess potentially, of other strategies. So, if anything, we think this regulation gives fiduciaries who want to offer this type of strategy a little bit more clear pathway to do so. At this point, we're not expecting it to become a common or prevalent offering, not the type of thing that every DC plan is offering. We're really encouraging organizations to listen to feedback from employees and undertake really a careful consideration and evaluation of socially responsible strategies. But that approach is going to continue to evolve just based on what's happening in Washington. Actually, there were some Democrats in the House last year that introduced a bill that would require socially responsible investments. That doesn't seem to have much support, so not expecting action there, but just gives you a sense of how different players are thinking about this concept, and it is likely here to stay.
Great, thank you. That was very helpful. Before I go to my last question, which is always action steps and recommendations
Mhm.
for our members who have joined us today. Just want to take a quick sidebar. It just seems appropriate, given that we're still in the middle of a global pandemic, to talk about some of the actions and reactions and behaviors and plan changes that we saw last year. So when the pandemic hit hard and fast, many organizations fell into a financial or economic distress pretty quickly and made some plan design changes, decided that they couldn't afford either for the short term or the longer term their prior level of contributions. They were looking for ways to cut expenses, and maybe we're taking other actions. How are you seeing that? Have you seen most organizations say, hey, things have gotten a little bit better, we feel more confident about the future? I know it's really hard to get survey data on this information. It's often very rear view mirror lagging information. So I'm asking you a little bit more for anecdotal, real time. What are you
Mhm.
hearing from your clients in this arena? Would be very helpful, I think, for our members to know.
Sure. Yeah, we certainly did see a handful of actions last year. Based on the numbers we've seen so far, generally about a quarter of companies took action to reduce or eliminate company contributions. We have seen many of those come back, especially matching contributions. A lot of organizations really had that as a high priority to try to bring that back for the first of the year, especially those that were using safe harbor status and wanting to have that for 2021. I think we'll definitely see for companies making, discretionary profit sharing style contribution, those we would expect to be fairly limited for the 2020 year. And then companies looking to bring those back as soon as they're able to do so. A lot of companies offered some of the special loan and withdrawal features under the CARES Act. That special CARES Act withdrawal was really the most popular feature. We saw about 4% of participants nationally take advantage of that special withdrawal option. Of course, usage of that varied really significantly by employer. And as we start to think about areas of focus going forward, especially if your plan did offer those special cares withdrawals, we're really talking with clients about first, let's promote the option for people to repay that savings. If they're getting a refund, a tax credit, if tax refund, if they're getting some stimulus money, great opportunity to put some of that money back, avoid the taxes associated with that withdrawal. And then how can we, help people recover from the impact on their retirement savings? It's a great opportunity to review some of your plan features, consider enhancing things like automatic enrollment, automatic increase, expanding those programs to capture more employees and promote higher levels of savings to help them rebuild any savings they may have lost last year.
Yeah, and another great opportunity to reach back out to your employees, that employee communication with these important messages about how to avoid tax consequences. Okay, as promised, last but not least, my final question is, what should our top action steps be as we go into 2021? As if our to-do lists weren't long enough. We have, a great audience today, and I know our members always want to make sure that they're staying on top of these issues. So what would you recommend that in the 401k retirement fund arena, our employers make sure that they put on their to-do list after today's session?
Sure. It would really strongly encourage a focus on and a review of governance. As mentioned earlier, it's not so much about the decisions you make, it's about how you made those decisions and can you prove how you made that decision. A review is so important. Even if you work with trusted providers today, making sure you're engaging in that process and that you can really articulate what those processes are to make the decisions, not just the decision made at the end of the day, whether that's monitoring investment performance. How do you compare that fund's performance? Are you reviewing that versus a benchmark versus a peer group, and feeling confident in interpreting those comparisons? How do you review plan fees? Do you know what your plan fees are? Do you know how they compare to the marketplace? And then reviewing plan administration. Do you feel confident in the features of your plan, that you know how they're being carried out, you know what your organization's responsible for, what your third parties are responsible for? And considering a review of your service providers, do you understand what fees they are charging, how they are earning compensation, what services they're providing to you, and what their status as a fiduciary is? Service providers can never just be a fiduciary. They're always a fiduciary for very specific elements. So understanding where they are and aren't acting as a fiduciary is really important. And then lastly, participant engagement. Marilyn, you mentioned communicating with employees. Especially we see more and more plans. We don't really have a lot of potential actions to take. If we've implemented best practices, we've got a great plan design in place. It's like, now what? And so the focus can really shift to participant engagement. Reassuring participants that they are doing the things that they need to do. Really pushing your provider partners to report to you on who's logging into the website, who's not logging into the website, what are they doing when they log into the website, so that you can promote some of the usage of the tools and the resources to really help participants feel good about their retirement readiness and the decisions that they've made.
Allison, there's the sun. We thought the sun would come in and just like clockwork, there it is, shining right on your
Yes.
face. So I just want to thank you again. I am so grateful for the knowledge that you've shared today. So many important pointers for our members and for HR Source. And again, our partnership with STRAT is so valuable. The information you've shared is something I know our participants today are going to find extremely useful. So thank you again for sharing your time and talent with us. 2021 is going to be an interesting ride, so hang on. And again, thanks to everyone for participating today in Straight from the Source. Hope to see you again soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Take care.